The rain in this city doesn't wash things clean. It just pushes the grime into the cracks. From where I sat, behind the reinforced glass of the concierge desk at the Sentinel, the street outside looked like a blurred watercolor painting done in shades of charcoal and neon. It was 2 a.m., the time when the city holds its breath, waiting for the drunks to pass out and the early risers to wake up. My name is Jack Mercer. In a past life, I wore a uniform that didn't have a name tag, just a blood type and a unit patch. I spent 15 years specialized in urban reconnaissance and extraction. My job was to see things that other people missed, to read the negative space in a room, to understand the geometry of danger. Now I watch monitors. I accept packages. I open doors for people who make more in a month than I'll make in a decade, and I wait. The Sentinel is a fortress of glass and steel, 40 stories of residential arrogance rising out of the financial district. It's a place where privacy is the only currency that matters. The tenants pay for silence, for security, and for the illusion that the chaos of the world can't touch them here. I was the guardian of that illusion, but on that Tuesday night, the illusion didn't just crack, it shattered. It started with the arrival of Arthur Penhaligon. He lived in the Penthouse, Unit 4001. Arthur was a man who looked like he was made of soft dough and expensive tailoring. He was in hedge funds, or maybe high-frequency trading money that moved faster than thought. Usually, he walked with the arrogant strut of a man who owned the pavement. Tonight, he was different. I watched him on the exterior perimeter camera before he even reached the revolving doors. He was glancing over his shoulder every 3 seconds. His pace was erratic. He wasn't walking. He was fleeing, but trying to look casual about it. When he burst through the lobby doors, a gust of wet wind followed him in. He was soaked. Not just damp from the rain, but sweating. I could see the sheen of it on his forehead under the harsh lobby lights. He didn't nod to me. He didn't do his usual dismissive wave. He went straight for the elevator bank. "Mr. Penhaligon," I said. My voice is deep, a little gravelly from years of shouting over rotor wash, but calm. "Everything all right, sir?" He flinched. Actually flinched. He turned his head, and his eyes were wide, showing too much white. He looked at me, but I don't think he saw me. He saw an obstacle, or maybe a witness. "Fine. I'm fine, Jack. Just cold." He wasn't cold. He was terrified. I know the look. I've seen it on hostages, and I've seen it on soldiers right before the ambush breaks. It's the look of a man who feels the crosshairs on his back. He jammed his finger against the call button. The light pinged. Elevator 2 opened. He stepped in, swiped his keycard for the penthouse, and the doors slid shut. I turned my eyes to the monitors. Force of habit. In my old line of work, you never stop tracking the asset until they are secure. I watched the feed from inside elevator 2. Arthur was standing in the corner, pressing himself against the mahogany paneling. He was checking his watch. He pulled out his phone, looked at it, and shoved it back into his pocket. The elevator counter on my console ticked up. 10, 15, 20. On the screen, Arthur suddenly grabbed his chest. It looked theatrical at first, like a bad actor playing a heart attack. He gasped, his mouth opening in a silent scream. He slumped against the wall, sliding down. Then, the strangest thing happened. The lights in the elevator flickered. Just for a second. The video feed hissed with static, a burst of digital snow, and then stabilized. When the image cleared, the elevator was empty. I blinked. I leaned closer to the screen. The floor indicator read 32. The car was still moving up, but Arthur Penhaligon was gone. There was no one on the floor. No body. No heap of wet clothes. Just the empty, polished floor of the cab. My heart rate didn't jump. It slowed down. That's the training. When the impossible happens, you don't panic, you analyze. I grabbed the master key and the radio. Control, this is Mercer at the desk. I spoke into the empty air, recording the log for the system. Possible incident in elevator 2. Investigating. I ran to the service elevator. It's faster. I overrode the controls and shot up to the 40th floor. If he had somehow gotten out, if the camera had looped, he would be there. The service car groaned as it climbed. I checked my watch. 2 minutes had passed since he entered the lobby. When I reached the 40th floor, the hallway was silent. The doors to elevator 2 were closed. I watched the indicator. It had arrived at 40, opened, and closed. I swiped my master override and forced the doors open. Empty. I stepped inside. The air smelled of expensive cologne and ozone. I looked up at the ceiling hatch. It was bolted shut from the inside. I looked at the floor. No trapdoors. This was a solid steel box suspended in a concrete shaft. There were no windows. Arthur Penhaligon had entered a steel box on the ground floor. The box had not stopped. The doors had not opened. And somewhere between the ground and the sky, a 200-pound man had evaporated. I walked back to the penthouse door. Unit 4, 1001. I knocked. Silence. I used the master key strictly against protocol, but this was an emergency. The apartment was dark. The floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the weeping city. The place was empty. No wet footprints. No sign of life. I went back to the elevator. I stood there, staring at the empty space where a man had been 5 minutes ago. I looked at the camera lens in the corner of the ceiling. It stared back, a black, unblinking eye. I reached up and touched the emergency hatch. Locked, sealed with paint. It hadn't been opened in years. I went back down to the lobby and called the police. Then I called the building manager. Then I sat down and replayed the tape. Entry, 2, 3, and 15 seconds A.M. Flicker, 2, 3, and 45 seconds A.M. Empty, 2, 3, and 46 seconds A.M. 1 second. He had 1 second to vanish. The police arrived 20 minutes later. Detective Miller. I knew him by reputation. He was a man who looked like he'd been dried out in a kiln, leathery skin, a suit that was 2 sizes too big, and eyes that had seen too many bodies to care about one more. He smelled of stale tobacco and rain. "So," Miller said, shaking his umbrella off on the pristine marble floor, "you're telling me the guy pulled a Houdini?" "I'm telling you what the camera shows," I said. I played the footage for him. Miller watched it 3 times. He squinted. He chewed on the inside of his cheek. "Glitch?" He grunted. "Camera loop. He got off on a floor. You missed it. The system says he went to the penthouse, but maybe he pried the doors on the 20th and slipped out." "The elevator didn't stop," I said quietly. "I monitored the ascent data. Continuous velocity. No stops." "Sensors fail," Miller said, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. "We'll search the shaft. He probably forced the doors, tried to climb out, and fell. We'll find a meat pancake at the bottom of the shaft." But they didn't. They searched the shaft for 3 hours. They checked the pit in the basement. They checked the top of the car. They checked every floor. Arthur Penhaligon wasn't in the building. He wasn't in the shaft. He wasn't on the roof. By 6 a.m., the sun was trying to bleed through the gray clouds. The building was waking up. Tenants were coming down, complaining about the police presence, complaining about the elevator being out of service. Miller was frustrated. He looked at me with suspicion, as if I had eaten the tenant. "You're the only one who saw him come in," Miller said, leaning over my desk. "And the cameras," I reminded him. "Cameras can be hacked. You have access to the security system, Mercer. You ex-military types. You know how to bypass things." "If I wanted to kill him?" I said, holding his gaze until he looked away. "I wouldn't make him vanish in an elevator. I'd make it look like a heart attack in his sleep. This is messy. This brings attention. I don't like attention. Miller grunted. He knew I was right, but he didn't like it. He left a couple of uniforms to watch the building and went back to the precinct to file a report on a missing person who apparently dissolved into thin air. I stayed at the desk. My shift was over, but I couldn't leave. The impossibility of it was an itch in the center of my brain. In the Special Forces, we learned that there is no such thing as magic. If something looks impossible, it's because you're missing a variable. You're looking at the illusion, not the wires. I rewound the tape again. I watched Arthur enter the lobby. I watched him walk to the elevator. I watched him enter. I paused the video. I zoomed in. Arthur's shoes. They were expensive. Italian leather. Loafers. But as he walked across the lobby, I noticed something. His right foot landed slightly heavier than his left. A tiny limp? No, he was favoring it. I advanced the frame. When he stood in the elevator, right before the static, he shifted his weight. I looked at the floor of the lobby. The cleaning crew hadn't arrived yet. I walked over to the path Arthur had taken. The marble was dry now, but I crouched down, getting my eyes level with the floor. I used the flashlight on my phone. Faint scuffs, but something else. A tiny, almost microscopic smear of something reddish-brown near the elevator door. Clay? Rust? I touched it. It was gritty. I went back to the monitors. I pulled up the external cameras. Not just the front door, but the service entrance, the garage, the fire exits. If Arthur didn't leave the elevator, he was still in the elevator. But the elevator was empty. Therefore, the premise was wrong. What if the man in the elevator wasn't Arthur? No. I saw his face. I spoke to him. It was Arthur. What if the elevator wasn't the elevator? No. I saw the doors open. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes. I visualized the shaft, a vertical tunnel running through the spine of the building. Concrete, steel, cables, counterweights. I thought about the static, the glitch. It lasted exactly 1 second, 2 hours, 3 minutes, and 45 seconds, to 2 hours, 3 minutes, and 46 seconds. In the digital world, a second is an eternity. In the physical world, it's nothing. You can't hide a body in a second, unless it was never there. I needed to see the apartment, really see it. Not the cursory glance I gave it earlier, and not the bull in a china shop search Miller's team did. They were looking for a body or a struggle. I was looking for a narrative. I waited until the uniforms in the lobby were distracted by a delivery driver arguing about parking. I slipped into the service elevator and took it to the 40th floor. The yellow police tape was draped across the door of 4001, a flimsy barrier that stopped honest people in law enforcement, but not anyone who actually wanted to get in. I ducked under it. The penthouse was silent, sealed in that heavy, expensive air that only rich houses have filtered, temperature-controlled, dead. I moved through the living room. Minimalist furniture. Abstract art that cost more than my pension. I went to the bedroom. The bed was made. The closet was full of suits arranged by color. I checked the shoes, dozens of pairs. I found the ones he was wearing last night. Or rather, the ones he usually wore. But he was wearing them when he disappeared, so they should be gone. I checked the rack. There was a gap. Okay, so he was wearing his own shoes. I moved to the study. A mahogany desk, clear surface. A laptop sat closed. I didn't touch it. Miller's tech guys would have already mirrored the drive, hopefully. I looked at the trash can. Empty. I looked at the window. It opened onto a terrace. I unlocked it and stepped out. The wind whipped at my jacket. 40 stories down, the city was a grid of lights. The rain had stopped, leaving the air crisp and cold. I looked at the railing. Wet. But on the far right corner, near the drain pipe, the soot on the railing was disturbed. Someone had leaned there. Recently. I looked down. There was a ledge about 4 feet below the terrace, running along the side of the building. It was purely decorative, architectural trim. No one could walk on it. It was 6 inches wide. I went back inside. I stood in the center of the room and closed my eyes. I tried to become Arthur, a man terrified, running from something. He comes home. He feels safe? No, he feels trapped. Why did he come home if he was scared? Because he had something to get, or something to hide. I went to the bathroom. Marble everywhere. I opened the medicine cabinet. Anti-anxiety meds, beta blockers, sleeping pills. Arthur was a nervous wreck long before last night. Then I saw it, on the floor, near the shower. A tiny, almost invisible shard of glass. I picked it up with a tissue. It was curved. A lens? A piece of a bulb? I looked up. The light fixtures were intact. The mirror was whole. I put the shard in my pocket. I left the apartment and went to the stairwell. I walked down 1 flight to the 39th floor. This floor was mechanical storage in the entrance to the upper HVAC units. It was locked, accessible only by maintenance. I had the key. I opened the heavy steel door. The roar of the ventilation fans hit me. It was loud here, industrial, the heart of the building that kept the blood pumping. I walked along the metal grating. The elevator shaft for Car 2 ran right through the center of this room. There was an access panel here, used for inspecting the cables. I approached the panel. The dust around the bolts was disturbed. Someone had opened this panel. I pulled out my multi-tool and undid the bolts. They turned easily, too easily. They had been oiled. I pulled the panel off. The dark throat of the elevator shaft yawned before me. I clicked on my flashlight and shone it into the void. The cables were greasy and black. The counterweight rail was to the left. And there, snagged on a bracket about 10 feet below me, was a piece of fabric, navy blue wool, the same color as Arthur's suit. I stared at it. It was impossible. If he fell from the car, he would be at the bottom. If he was in the car, how did a piece of his suit get snagged on the times outside, times of the shaft, 10 feet times below times the mechanical room, which is below the penthouse? The elevator had passed this point on its way up. If Arthur was inside the car, he couldn't have snagged his suit on the outside bracket, unless he wasn't inside the car. My mind raced back to the footage. The man in the elevator. The flicker. I pulled out my phone and called my contact, an old buddy from the unit who now worked in digital forensics for a private firm. "Sully," I said when he picked up, "I need you to look at a video file. I'm sending it now. I need to know if it's a deepfake." "Jack? It's 7 a.m. I haven't slept. I haven't either. Check your secure drop." I sent him the clip of the elevator ride. "Give me 10 minutes, he groaned. I waited in the roar of the HVAC room. I watched the cables move as other elevators in the bank carried people to work. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "It's not a deepfake," Sully said. "Lighting is consistent. Shadows match. No artifacts on the face. That's a real person. What about the glitch? The static?" "That's the interesting part," Sully said, his voice waking up. "That's not digital corruption. That's magnetic interference. Strong. Something emitted a massive electromagnetic pulse right next to the camera sensor for a split second. It scrambled the signal. An EMP? Miniature. Like someone triggered a high-voltage discharge nearby. But Jack, there's something else." "What?" "The time code. The system clock on the overlay says 2 hours, 3 minutes, and 45 seconds. But if you analyze the refresh rate of the fluorescent light, you know how lights flicker at 60 hertz. Yeah. The flicker cycle jumps. There are missing frames. About 90 seconds of footage were cut, but the timestamp was hard-coded to look continuous. Someone looped the timestamp, but they physically cut the feed. 90 seconds, I whispered. Whoever did this had access to the security feed in real time. They froze the image, cut the feed, and then resumed it 90 seconds later. That static blast? That was probably the switchover point to hide the jump cut. Thanks, Sully. I hung up. 90 seconds. The elevator didn't transport Arthur to another dimension. It stopped for 90 seconds. But the log said it didn't. That means someone overrode the elevator computer to report continuous movement while physically holding the car still. Where? The fabric was snagged below the 39th floor. That meant the car stopped here, right in front of the access panel I was standing next to. Arthur didn't disappear from the penthouse. He was taken out of the elevator right here, on the 39th floor, through the maintenance hatch in the roof of the car. But why the charade? Why make it look like he vanished at the top? Because of the timeline. If he disappears at 2-3 a.m. in the elevator and the body is never found, it's a mystery. If he is found dead in the basement, it's a murder. But where was he now? I looked around the HVAC room. It was a maze of ducts and massive fans. It was loud. No one came up here except maintenance, and they were on a monthly schedule. I walked deeper into the room. In the corner, behind a stack of air filters, was a large, insulated duct. It was the main intake for the building's climate control. It was big enough for a man to crawl into. The bolts on the inspection hatch were scratched. I didn't open it. I knew what I would find, and I knew that if I opened it, I would destroy the crime scene. I needed to know who. Who had the technical skill to hack the security feed, override the elevator logic, and the physical strength to pull a dead weight out of a hatch in 90 seconds? Not Arthur's rivals. They hired lawyers, not ninjas. This was personal. This was intimate. This was someone who knew the building better than I did. I thought about the nervousness of Arthur. He wasn't running from a stranger. He was running from someone he knew, someone he let get close. I went back down to the lobby. The day shift, concierge, a kid named Leo, was there. "Hey, Jack," Leo said, looking at my wet jacket. "You look like hell. Police are still swarming the office." "Leo," I asked, leaning on the desk, "who does the maintenance on the elevators? Specifically the software updates?" "The external company. Apex Lift Systems." "No," I said. "Who lets them in? Who supervises them? Who has the master codes for the building's integration?" Leo blinked. "Mr. Vance, the building engineer. He's got the keys to everything. He's in the basement office." Vance. I knew him. Quiet guy. Worked here for 20 years. Knew every wire, every pipe. We had coffee sometimes. He complained about his pension. He complained about the rich tenants treating him like furniture. Arthur Penhaligon was the head of the tenant board. He was the one who pushed to cut the building's operating budget last year. He was the one who denied the staff Christmas bonus. It was a motive, sure. But murder? An elaborate, high-tech murder? Vance was an old-school mechanic. He used wrenches, not code injection, unless he wasn't working alone. I needed to talk to Vance, but I couldn't just walk in and accuse him. I needed leverage. I went back to the footage of the lobby. I rewound too before Arthur entered. 1 a.m. 1:30 a.m. At 1:45 a.m., I saw Vance cross the lobby. He was carrying a heavy tool bag. He went into the service elevator. He didn't come back down until 2:30 a.m., after the incident. He was in the building. He was in the service shafts. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. I liked Vance. He was one of the invisible people, like me. I took the elevator down to the basement levels. The air got heavier, smelling of concrete and grease. Vance's office was at the end of a long corridor, past the boiler rooms. The door was open. Vance was sitting at his desk, soldering a circuit board. He looked up when I entered. His face was gray, tired. He didn't look like a killer. He looked like a man who was waiting for the bill to arrive. "Jack," he said. His voice was steady. Crazy night. Yeah, I said. I closed the door behind me. Vance, tell me about the magnetic interference on the elevator cam. His hand froze. The soldering iron smoked in the silence. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, but he didn't look at me. 90 seconds, I said. You cut the feed. You stopped the car at the 39th floor. You pulled him out. Why? Vance put the soldering iron down. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. He looked old, defeated. He wasn't supposed to die, Vance whispered. The confession hung in the air, heavy and irreversible. What happened, Vance? He was laundering money, Vance said. Huge amounts. Through the building's renovation fund. He was stealing from the reserve. I found the accounts. I confronted him. He laughed at me. He said, who would believe the grease monkey over the finance god? Vance looked up at me, his eyes wet. I just wanted to scare him. I wanted to trap him in the elevator, make him listen. I rigged the car to stop. I was going to talk to him through the intercom, tell him I had the proof. I wanted a confession, but he died, I said. His heart, Vance said. He had a condition. I didn't know. As soon as the car stopped, the lights flickered. He just grabbed his chest. I watched on the monitor. He went down. I panicked, Jack. I didn't want to kill him, but I was the one who rigged the elevator. It was felony kidnapping, manslaughter. I'd go to jail for the rest of my life. So you made him disappear, I said. I pulled him out, Vance said, his voice trembling. I put him in the HVAC intake. I was going to move him later, tonight, take him out to the river. He looked at me, pleading. I'm not a murderer, Jack. It was an accident. A stupid, angry accident. I looked at Vance. I saw a man push too far, who made a bad choice, and then compounded it with panic. Where is the proof? I asked. The money laundering. On a drive. In my safe. Give it to me. He hesitated, then unlocked a drawer and handed me a USB stick. I pocketed it. Get up, Vance. Are you taking me to the police? We're going to the 39th floor, I said. You're going to show me exactly what you did. We rode the service elevator up in silence. The tension was thick enough to choke on. When we got to the mechanical room, Vance walked towards the HVAC duct. Stop, I said. Vance froze. You're lying, I said softly. Vance turned slowly. What? Arthur Penhaligon didn't die of a heart attack, I said. I saw the footage. He grabbed his chest. Yes, but I also found a shard of glass in his bathroom, and I found that red grit on the lobby floor. I don't. The red grit is brick dust from the old chimney stack on the roof. You weren't in the elevator shaft, Vance. You were on the roof. I stepped closer. And the shard? That was a crushed ampule. Amyl nitrite. Or maybe something stronger. Something to induce cardiac arrest. Vance's demeanor changed. The tired old man vanished. His posture straightened. His eyes went cold. You're very observant, Jack. Too observant for a doorman. I'm not a doorman, I said. I'm a sentinel. And I know that you couldn't have pulled a 200-pound man out of a hatch by yourself in 90 seconds. Not with your bad back. You have a slipped disc, Vance. I've seen you limp when it rains. Vance smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. So? So you didn't pull him out. You opened the hatch, yes. But someone else pulled him up. I heard the click of a gun hammer behind me. I didn't turn. I knew that sound. A snub-nosed revolver. Small. Concealable. Hello, Mrs. Penhaligon, I said. Arthur's wife stepped out from the shadows of the ventilation units. She was wearing dark coveralls and gloves. She held the gun steady. She was 20 years younger than Arthur, a former gymnast. Strong. Agile. He was leaving me, she said. Her voice was ice. He was taking the money and running to the Caymans, leaving me with nothing but debt. So you recruited Vance, I said. The disgruntled employee and the scorned wife. Vance needed money, she said. I needed access. It was a good plan, I admitted. The heart attack in the locked box. The impossible disappearance. It would have driven the police crazy for years. They'd call it a runaway or a suicide. And they still will, she said, raising the gun. As soon as we deal with the loose end, I looked at Vance. She's going to kill you too, Vance. You know that, right? You're the loose end. Vance looked at her. He saw the truth in her eyes. He blinked. Elena? Vance said. Shut up, Vance, she snapped. Do it. Open the incinerator chute. Vance looked at the heavy hatch in the floor used for industrial waste disposal. Jack, Vance said, his voice breaking. I really didn't want him to die. I just wanted my pension. I know, I said. The gun was pointed at my chest, 10 feet away. In the Tuileries tunnel in 04, I closed 20 feet against a man with an AK-47. I took a bullet in the shoulder, but he didn't go home. 10 feet. You moved the body to the intake? I asked, stalling. He's in there, she said. Wrapped in plastic. We were just about to move him to the incinerator when you showed up. You won't make the shot, I said to her. Excuse me? You're shaking. Adrenaline dump. You're a gymnast, not a shooter. You'll pull to the right. You might hit my arm, maybe my ribs, but you won't kill me instantly. And in the 2 seconds it takes you to fire again, I will break every bone in your hands. She hesitated. Her eyes flickered to the gun sights. That was the mistake. You never look at the sights. You look at the target. I moved. The gun went off. The sound was deafening in the metal room. I felt the burn of the bullet grazing my left bicep. She pulled right, just like I said. I didn't tackle her. I stepped inside her guard and slapped the gun barrel aside, then drove my palm into her solar plexus. She folded like a deck chair. The gun clattered across the grating. Vance dived for it. I spun around, ready to kick him in the face, but Vance didn't point the gun at me. He pointed it at the floor. Stop! He screamed. Just stop! He was shaking, holding the gun with 2 hands. I'm done. I'm done with this. I stood there, clutching my bleeding arm. Elena was gasping for air on the floor. Vance was weeping, holding the gun. Put it down, Vance, I said gently. It's over. He looked at me. Then he looked at the gun. He placed it carefully on the floor and kicked it toward me. Call Miller, Vance said. Tell him I'm sorry. The aftermath of a solved crime is always disappointing. It lacks the poetry of the mystery. It becomes paperwork, Miranda rights, and crime scene tape. Miller arrived with backup. They found Arthur's body in the intake duct, just as Elena had said. They found the crushed ampoule of a potent synthetic toxin in her pocket. She hadn't had time to dispose of it. The story came out in the interrogation room. Elena had been poisoning Arthur for weeks, weakening his heart. Vance had rigged the elevator controls. When Arthur entered, Vance triggered the EMP device, a homemade coil he built to loop the camera. He engaged the emergency brakes on the 39th floor. Elena was waiting on top of the car. She opened the hatch. She dropped the final dose, a gas canister, into the cab. Arthur, already weak, went into a rest. She dropped down, hooked a harness to him, and Vance used a motorized winch to pull the body up into the shaft. It took them exactly 80 seconds. Then Vance released the brake, cleared the loop, and the empty elevator continued to the penthouse. It was brilliant. It was precise, and it failed because Vance felt guilty, and because Elena was greedy. I gave my statement. Miller patted me on the back, the uninjured one. Good work, Mercer, he said. Maybe you should come back to the force. We could use a brain like yours. No thanks, I said. I like the desk. It's quieter. I walked out of the precinct into the morning light. The rain had started again, a soft, gray drizzle that covered the city like a shroud. My arm throbbed where the bullet had grazed me, a reminder that I wasn't just a spectator. I went back to the Sentinel. I had to finish my shift report. The lobby was quiet. The marble floor was clean. The spot where Arthur had stood, where I found the brick dust, was polished to a shine. I sat behind the desk. I looked at the monitors. Elevator 2 was back in service. I watched the screen. A woman in 14B got in with her poodle. She checked her hair in the mirror. The doors closed. The numbers ticked up. I watched her all the way to the 14th floor. The doors opened. She got out. I exhaled. The city is full of ghosts. Some are dead. Some are living. Arthur Penhaligon was a ghost now. Vance was a ghost in the system of the penal code. And me? I'm just the guy who watches the doors. I opened the logbook and picked up my pen. Asterisk 8 a.m. Incident resolved. All systems nominal. Asterisk. I closed the book. The city moved on. The traffic outside swelled into a roar. The illusion of safety was restored. But I knew better. I looked at the reflection in the glass. I adjusted my tie. I waited for the next person to walk in out of the rain, bringing their secrets with them.